All right, we're back in the podcast studio again. What's going on?
I pre-planned an 8 before the podcast, so I didn't
Oh,
have
there we
to
go.
really.
So it's not lunch talk.
Yeah. Although I have to tell you, is it a northeastern thing, or maybe it's a Philly thing, or a Pennsylvania thing? This whole concept of stuffed sandwiches. Is it
I
They're Permanti
Permantes
brothers,
is Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh. Yeah,
Yeah.
but
I mean, it's
they're
it's
big into stuffed sandwiches at Permanti, right?
yeah. That's a Pittsburgh thing.
Okay. Well, I got some chicken salad sandwich mix from Costco and
Hmm.
some croissants. And it's good just as a sandwich, but I'm like, no, this like needs a different texture or layer. So I threw some frozen fries in the air fryer and put the fries on top of
Ooh,
the chicken salad sandwich on in the croissant, and it's just so good.
yeah.
We need to stuff fries in more sandwiches.
I do agree with that. The one thing though that I know is this area and I grew up with. I don't know how regional it is or how broad it is, but like stuffing potato chips
Oh yeah.
in a cold sandwich.
So I don't know if that was a thing, but man, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, I was addicted. Like I was going several times a week to Jimmy John's to get the
Hmm.
number nine, the Italian. I don't know what they call it, but it's like the East Coast Italian.
Hmm.
And then I would get a bag of the jalapeno kettle chips, and
Oh,
I
that
would
sounds
dump them
great.
on top of the sandwich and smash it all down. I'm like, this is the most incredible thing. It like gives it a crunch and it's so good.
Nice.
Potato chips on deli sandwiches. If you haven't done it, you have to try it.
Yeah.
It adds incredible depth.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. Like I mean, like my God, like that. Just the thought of that, like the sound, the texture. I mean, it
yeah,
takes me back to like grade school, where you sit at the lunch table and stuff
just like
potato chips in.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that's where a lot of stuff. If I remember back to the lunchroom in grade school, I'm like, we were doing weird stuff with food, right? And then I think,
And then people grew up and
and then they
made
grew up
careers
and
out of
they're like, you know what? We should make a restaurant about putting
it,
fries in sandwiches
which
because
is
we loved doing that in elementary school. And then people are
yes.
like, yeah, this is really good.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not complaining. I'm a fan. So I am a fan. Well, we're back. How was the break? Are you back into the swing of work?
Yeah. I'm definitely back into the swing of work now, and like the year is started off quickly. There've been past years where people come back, and then like the first 3 weeks, people are just trying to figure out what to do. Not this year. Like
Yeah,
everybody is like both internal within our organization and our team and clients alike. Like everybody, for some reason, like this year, it's all about getting the year off to a very quick start.
yeah, yeah. I felt it too, and it's good. I this was the first year that I think I really took time off between Christmas and New Year, which was good. But by the end of it, I'm like, I gotta get going. I gotta do something because I
Mhm.
literally just like, I'm just gonna lay on the couch and chill, and
Yeah.
so, but
I mean, with the move and all, I'll be honest with you, like it was a very busy break in between doing the fun stuff, the three of us, with our extended family, the normal holiday stuff. I was also in the process of painting and cleaning and starting to
mm,
move out. So it was crazy, like, and then just coming right back into work. It took me a couple extra days this year to really get back into that groove and that mindset.
yeah, yeah, no, definitely. I mean, after you've taken some time off, it takes a bit to wind it back up again. But yeah, I feel it too. Lots going on, lots of things to do. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
So,
Like, is there anything in particular that you're noticing, like any particular themes or trends in conversations that you're having?
not necessarily specific themes. I just think people are wanting to do more. With conference season starting to ramp up in person, there's lots of talk. I think people have missed being together. and finding opportunities to collaborate and do stuff in person. It'll be interesting to see. We've talked to Adobe Summit and other events. Still not sure, like, are these things going to go? Are people going to go? And so there's kind of lots of talk around what are we doing with our travel schedules and things. So I just think in general, people are motivated to do some good stuff. There's also a lot of, I guess, unease too. I'm feeling, with the economic
Hmm.
landscape, lots of unease where we see, I guess I want to call it copycat layoffs. It's like, well, Facebook
Yeah.
is laying people off. Well, Salesforce is laying people off, so we should lay people off, which has people uncomfortable. And I think as part of that uncomfortableness, I think it's motivating people to get out there and showcase their skills and their value and kind of make sure that they have options. So seeing lots of people taking the opportunity to make sure that they're using it as a motivator rather than as a depressing type of event.
Sorry, distracted. I was taking care of something. Um, yeah, I mean, definitely the layoffs in both December and into January. It was definitely, I like how you worded it, copycats. Well, if they're doing
Mhm.
it, we're going to do it too. And it's just it's crazy, and it seems like the common theme with all of them, or at least the spin that they're trying to put on it, is well, we hired too fast, so we need to quickly lay off fast just to appease executive management, appease Wall Street, appease
Mhm.
shareholders, and everything. So like and everybody's using the same story. We just
Yeah,
hired too fast, and
right.
the economic landscape is quickly changing. So we need to quickly adjust.
Yeah, and I think they're feeling the backlash of it, and sadly, I think they're coming up with some creative ways to make attrition look more organic. I've seen lots of companies being heavy-handed with return to office, and I
Yes.
think a big part of that is, hey, here's an opportunity to cut a huge part of our workforce because they're not going to want to come back to the office. So let's just be heavy-handed on making it a requirement so it doesn't look like we're letting all these people go. They're making the choice to leave, but really I think they're designing a lot of these things to further and further cut the workforce. Yeah, I mean, we I made this, and we're going way down a tangent here, but I made this post on LinkedIn last night about, if I'm at a company like Salesforce and the executive leadership is out there saying that remote employees are a problem, they're a drain on the company. It's like, I don't know that I'd be working very hard. I'd be using my time to find an exit plan and a new job if I was at one of these companies. And one of my friends chimed in and said, hey, I get what you're saying, but two wrongs don't make a right. And I thought about it. I'm like, yeah, I was a bit flippant in my remark, but really, should we be giving our best? Because is that giving the wrong message to these leaders that their behavior is okay? And I've done it throughout my career. Like, I've had some shitty bosses, yet I continued to work at an elite level. And looking back on, I'm like, wait a minute. Yeah, I should have my standards. I shouldn't, compromise my standards. But by continuing to operate at an elite level, is that sending the wrong message that, oh, by the way, your actions are okay? Because they're not okay.
Hmm.
And I think that, if we do that through this trend and we say, hey, the employee has to be the bigger person, we're not really sending a message to these leaders that are making, in my opinion, some really crappy decisions about how they're leading their teams.
Yeah, and I love how they say the remote employees are a drain, and they don't bring anything to actually back that up.
Right.
They make this statement. So you're also talking about bad behavior. It's we'll prove it,
Yeah.
show it, show where the employees are a drain or they're holding the company back.
Yeah. And I don't think they can. And I think a big part of it is that, for most of these big companies, they don't want autonomous employees working for them. They want drones. They want
Yeah.
people to go in and just do what they're told. And I think they reluctantly went down this path of remote and unlocking the autonomy that remote gives because they were forced into it because of COVID. And now coming out of it, they're like, nope, we have to take the power back. And it's sad to see. I was hoping
Mhm.
that the company leadership would see that the office wasn't working before, and what was missing was trusting employees and providing them autonomy. And regardless of it's in office, remote, or hybrid, it's not about location, it's about how we work. And I
Mhm.
just think these, as financially incredibly successful as these companies are, making billions of dollars a year, they seem so ignorant when it comes to just the basics of how to treat people humanely. And
Yeah.
I was hoping this would cause them to rethink things, and clearly from what they're signaling to the market, it didn't.
Mm. Well, and I think in a way you're seeing the Peter principle apply.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that everyone eventually gets promoted
Mm-hmm.
above their beyond their skill level, and we've talked about it time and time again. It's one of the reasons why they want employees in the office. If they the excuse they use is creativity and collaboration.
Right.
Well, if that were really the case, offices would be completely designed differently.
That's right.
You would have actual like creative working space and not a giant cube farm.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'll tell you this, cubes do not, help bring about collaborative work.
No.
So they use this, it's about being collaborative when the thing is they don't know how to manage.
Yeah.
Like I think if you look at your majority of your executives out there, they don't know how to manage a remote workforce.
That's right.
Why? Because it's hard. It is a very difficult thing because it's very easy if you're some mid-level manager to go over, tap people on the shoulders like, "Hey, did you see this?" or "How's that?" or walk around the office and oh, people are typing away on keyboards. We're good.
That's right, and that's kind of my feedback is we're pretending that they know how to manage in office. They
Yeah,
don't. They're just kind of defaulting to this lowest common denominator of, are you working hard? Well, then you need to work harder. Are you in line? Well, you need to get back in line. And it's funny, my first job out of college, do you know what they called the area I worked in? Because I didn't have a cube, I just had a desk.
bullpen.
Bullpen. Literally, we're like pinned in like animals in
Yeah,
this cage, so that they can keep control of us. And like, this isn't leadership, this isn't management. And so I think it's a big problem when we're contrasting remote and in office, is that we pretend that in office was working, and it wasn't working. It's not about the location, it's about leadership. And leadership isn't being a micromanager walking around saying, is Jim in his desk at 9 o'clock? Because
yeah,
we've all had managers that's what they did, right?
we all have.
Yeah.
Um, so where I was going with like they can't prove it. They can't prove data is actually my segue into our topic today.
Awesome.
So what we've been going down a series of episodes around storytelling.
Hmm.
Um, and previously we talked about storytelling with sales. So today I want to talk about storytelling with data. And continue the topic there because as we've set the stage with storytelling. Storytelling provides a level of familiarity, and when it's done well, it conveys a tremendous amount of information in a way that resonates with everybody involved, whether it's one to one to many, in a large group, in a setting, in a small conversation. Um, so data by itself is cold and the opposite of what I was just talking about. It's unfamiliar. If
Yeah.
you just throw a chart up or a table up with it with just the raw data, people aren't going to quickly be able to grasp it or or latch on to it. Um, and what that does is people like discount it. It's like, okay, that's great. The chart looks great and all that table looks like there's a lot of information there, but I don't understand it, so we're going to move on. But when data is part of a story, it can transform a whole conversation. So
Oh yeah.
being able to tell a story around, say, your current customer journey on your website, and the checkout flow or the lead flow, and you telling the story of how customers interact with the site and what the data is telling you about that quickly will help bring the other people in the room into what you what your ultimate purpose is. Is it a redesign? Is it minor changes or whatnot? um so that's great and all, but how do you actually tell a story with data? Like, um and how do you craft that, and how do you get to that point where maybe like it almost becomes like second nature?
Yeah, and I think it's such a complicated topic to unpack, but such an important conversation to be having, because I think this is one of those cases where I believe that there are truly some right ways and some wrong ways to go about addressing this topic. So, um, I guess I'll give you kind of three examples, and we can dive into them. In the so I'll lay out a spectrum of the wrong way, kind of somewhere in the middle, and what I see as the right way. So historically, the people that have been in my mind the best at storytelling with data are people that typically have ulterior motives and are using data in very unethical ways. And they've learned that they could use the story around the data to push their narratives, to push their biases, to convince people of things that may or may not be true. It's like, well, this is the data. It's not me saying it. It's like, well, no, actually, you're wrong. The data is saying something else. You've just bastardized it and used story to make it sound more compelling. And that's a huge concern. And the reason why taking a more, I guess what I would describe ethical approach to storytelling is such a critical component, and also such an important thing around data literacy in general, which we've talked quite a bit about, and was one of the motivating reasons for writing a children's book, is that we have way too many of these bad actors that are using story around data to really sell misinformation, and that's dangerous. In the middle, I think you have people that aren't bad actors, that truly want to, leverage data in a more, let's call it, entertaining way. And I think that that's completely fine. Data can be fascinating. We can tell all sorts of really engaging stories with data. However, they use data storytelling as the lead rather than a way as to communicate a difficult subject, which you kind of laid out. The data is unfamiliar, and so
Hmm.
typically they'll craft the story and then they'll go find the data to weave into the story. And oftentimes, I think that's misguided and is not really treating the data in a fair and ethical way. What I think the right way to do is to be true data analysts and allow the data to tell the story, and then for us to craft it into a meaningful way in which it can become approachable. Because again, it's a topic that can be incredibly scary for a lot of people. And when you go into an executive meeting and start talking about all these numbers, you see their eyes glaze over and they check out, right? It's like, pull up
Hmm.
the laptop and start surfing Instagram or something. Um, and so I think that's the way that storytelling needs to be thought about, is doing true analysis, because even as independent analysts, I think we have a hard time not injecting our bias into it, even when we're trying not to. But allowing the data to really just speak for itself, and then figuring out a way that we can use story to communicate the story that the data is telling to people is really the right approach. And I think it absolutely can be done. Um, I follow this guy on YouTube. He has a channel. I think we may have talked about it on previous episodes, called Stand Up Maths, in which he talks about math, but he does it in such a storytelling, amazing way that it takes some pretty complex math topics, and um, without bastardizing the concepts, he's able to wrap a story around it that someone that may not be a math nerd can understand. And that's how we need to be thinking about data. We don't need to dumb it down. We don't need to talk in just technical lingo. We can find a way to respect our audience, let the data really stand for itself, and find a way to package it in a way that it can be approachable by people everywhere, not just data nerds.
Thinking back, you mentioned there the executives, the eyes starting to glaze over the minute you start to really bring up like detailed information. Are
Yeah.
there any particular stories that stand out where you experienced that you had all this great information and then you start to get into the data and it just doesn't resonate?
I mean, I think I shared this story when I was client side working for an online dating site where I had worked with our internal data sciences team to build some models, and I was super geeked about. I'm like, this is so awesome. And we had a monthly data readout with the executive team where we talked about kind of the health of our websites and what we were seeing from customer growth and lifetime value. And I brought some of the guys from the data science team. And after the meeting, the CEO pulled me aside into an office to never do that again. We keep them in the basement for a reason.
Yeah.
And it wasn't what they were saying was wrong. Like, I thought it was brilliant and engaging, but to the CMO, to the CIO, to the CEO, like, what the hell are these guys talking about? Like, I have no idea what these guys are talking about. And not that we need to dumb it down for an audience, but we have to know who our audience is and have to package that up in such a way that we use a story to tell the true meaning of the data. I failed to understand that until that day and became crystal clear, like, Jason, you will never do that again. Okay, got you. I understand.
So, would you say that that's a common pitfall, like getting overexcited about the data and not really thinking about how it's going to go over?
Yeah, we
If
see it
that's it?
all. Yeah, we see it all the time. We see it in companies all the time, and I don't think it's coming from a bad place. I think that there are definitely occasions where you have a few people that like to flex their smarts. So, like, I'm going to go in and talk all this data mumbo jumbo and technology just to make it look like I'm smart. That happens, but what happens more often than not is just these people really love what they do and are super excited about the data, and they just want to go talk shop. And they fail to realize that the people they're talking to is not the audience that they talk to every day. It's a completely different audience, and they've got to change their message, their way of presenting. They have to create that concept of a story around what they're doing. Otherwise, you lose people, right? Just think about something that you get super giddy about and you just want to, like, vomit all this information out, that there's no structure to it, there's no story, there's no beginning, middle, and end, because you're so excited, and at the end of it you're like, right, and the people are talking to, like, Jamon, what the hell you just said the last 5 minutes? It was a bunch of words coming out.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had that happen.
We all have, right?
Yeah. So you bring up a good point there, like beginning, middle, end. If you were tasked with bringing some kind of insights to a client, and you knew, like, what are some of the things that you've learned over your career that you even take for granted as far as like what goes into the structure of that?
Yeah. So when I was in pre-college, so junior high, high school, I was on the newspaper staff, and one as part of that, I had the opportunity to go and sit with actual newspaper staff at a local newspaper, the Ogden Standard Examiner in Ogden, Utah, and I learned about how to craft a story. And the concept they use, like, this will date me, like, literally, you got physical newspaper delivered to your house by the paper boy every morning. They pulled out an edition of the paper and they started drawing upside down triangles on all the articles, and they said, this is how we think about building a story. We should be able to physically draw an upside down triangle on this physical printout of the story, and it will define how we structure the stories. And I took that lesson to heart, and I think it applies to both how you write a news article and how you write a readout from an analysis that you're doing for your stakeholders. And the upside down triangle theory is that you don't bury the lead. You have your broad summary. Here's what happened in the first couple paragraphs of the article. And actually, one of our clients takes this approach, by the way, and they've built it, engineered it into their online version. So Christian Science Monitor, if you've read any of their articles, will allow you to look at how they structure this with a little slider that says, do you want the quick read or the long read? And if you click the quick read, it's literally the top part of that upside down triangle. If you click I want the long read, it's the bottom half of the triangle added to it. And so in that top half, the theory is that if all your readers do is read the first 2 or 3 paragraphs of your story, they'll know all of the critical details about it. Even if they stopped reading right there, they know what they need to know. And then for everyone else that wants to go deeper and get into more of the minutia and details that are important but don't change what the narrative is, then they can read all of that. So as you go down, you narrow and narrow and narrow down into more finite kind of details around the story. And I think the same thing applies to how we do our deliverables as an analyst. And then again, I had this experience, even though I had learned that kind of upside down triangle approach to writing a story, I forgot about it when I went to work client side, and I wanted to write my story as like a Hollywood blockbuster, like tease them, and then ta-da at the end, this big reveal. And when I did that, it didn't work. And again, executives pulled me aside, like, look, we don't have the time to sit through your 2-hour epic. We need to have the pertinent details at the top, the first couple slides. Tell me what you're going to tell me. And if all I see are these first 2 or 3 slides, I have an idea of the story. And then if we want to dive deeper into the details and start picking things apart, put those later in your deck and narrow that focus into more finite focus topics. But if all we see is those first couple slides, that should give us the entire story that we need to know.
Interesting. I remember talking about this a couple of years ago. Now that you brought it up, the idea of that, because I think it is exciting to tell that story where there's like teasers and there's little hints here and there, and you end with this huge crescendo,
Right.
and this huge climax of like, this is what we need to do, and you have to fight that urge and just say it right out of the gate, this is what we need to do and why, and then here's the additional supporting
Yeah, I,
information.
I mean, it's definitely the path that I buy into. And again, that kind of, we want to create a Hollywood story, I think, are these people in the middle that they don't have bad motives for wanting to do that. They just want to be entertainers, and they want to create this script of drama and intrigue, and then ta-da at the end there's a big spoiler, and like, but that's not what businesses need. They need reporters, and we need to think more
Mhm.
like delivering the news in a way that it can be consumed in a very efficient way, and it still can be it still needs to be entertaining and engaging and novel, and it needs to have all of that, otherwise they're just going to ignore it. But we're not being asked to be Hollywood scriptwriters. We're being asked to be journalists, I think, is a better way to describe it. And journalists need to understand the art of story. It's just, again, we need to know our audience. Our audience isn't in for a 2-hour, blockbuster movie premiere. They need to skim through, 5 or 6 really important articles in today's news to orient themselves to where we're at. And I think that that's where we really need to be on kind of the left hand side of the spectrum. Definitely being uh, opponents of this kind of far other side that wants to use data for evil, kind of taking the narrative and story of the people that want to craft these Hollywood thrillers and take that and say, okay, let's figure out how to be entertaining journalists. We're not, trying to entertain you with a lot of Hollywood kind of explosions and all of this stuff. We're trying to entertain you by wrapping a narrative or story around it that makes it meaningful, approachable by you.
I'm going to put my dad of a preschooler hat on for a moment.
Yeah.
Like the TV show that parents are raving about these days, it's Bluey. And not
Mm-hmm.
gonna lie, like Bluey's on in our house on a regular basis. But the thing is Bluey in multiple ways has mastered the art of appealing to not just the kids but the parents, where
Mm-hmm.
the parents can say, I don't mind this being on because I could tolerate it, or even like it. Like there are parents out there that enjoy watching Bluey with their kids, and
Mm-hmm.
there's some key things to it. The episodes are 7 minutes long. Like your typical like animated TV show, like you think of The Simpsons or Family Guy, they're 22 minutes long.
Yeah.
Your typical animated kids show is 11 minutes long. This is 7 minutes. And so the episodes are easy to consume. There is, while it's easy to consume, there is a very deep story to it, like that the parents pick up, but the lesson is also like put out in front of the kid's face like right away. So you get hooked on it, and honestly, it's just funny as can be. Like
Yeah.
I enjoy it. There's a couple episodes I enjoy watching.
Yeah, and again, I think that goes to show you the importance of understanding your audience and crafting the story and the timeline and the narrative in such a way that you're addressing your audience. And I think as data professionals, we often forget that we don't think about our audience, so we don't think about it in either of those scenarios. As the Hollywood storyteller, we're not thinking about the needs of our audience, and as just hardcore analysts that are barfing out numbers, we're not thinking about our audience. If we're going to truly be successful, this has to be something that we adopt. Otherwise, we're going to be, again, stuck in the basement cranking out numbers and doing really really cool stuff, but the world doesn't get to see it because we're not interesting.
Yeah. So earlier I asked you, thinking back in your career, where like you know, an example of where it went wrong and it went wrong badly. What about the flip side of that? Like, can you think of times where like the everything went as perfect as could be? You had a deep level of information, but you had it structured in such a way that what you were talking about resonated incredibly well with the audience.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have lots of examples of that, and it's one of the things that I feel like I've been able to hone as a skill over my career. And one of the pieces of feedback that I've received a lot is that people say that I have this unique ability to take incredibly complex topics and make them understandable, digestible to people that don't understand them. And I've got examples working client side more recently. I've been doing some work with graduate students at East Tennessee State University, and every time I meet with them, I get feedback saying something like, "Oh, like we thought like data was so like nerdy and cold and unapproachable, but after hearing you talk, like this is exciting. Like we want to learn more." And it's those opportunities where you can see that you can take something that may feel cold and sterile and communicate it in such a way that you can get people that may have had a very negative view of it and turn them into someone that's very excited about what you do. And we've been able to do that with students, and we've been able to do that with clients, going in and talking with executives that have been historically frustrated and saying, wait a minute, like this is what data can do, this is what analytics can do for us. I'm like, yeah. It's like, why have we been so turned off by it over the years? Like, well, you've been talking to scientists that don't really know how to talk with a CMO or a CEO. And these conversations can be had, but you need to find people to understand how to craft that story, that narrative around it, to make it approachable, entertaining. It's important. And sadly, there are lots of super super talented people in the analytics space that reject that whole idea. They say, no, the data is so important. We don't want to like take value away from the data by having to think about a story or trying to make it interesting or entertaining. It should just be interesting because of the way it is. And it is to you and I, it is to them, but it's not to most of the world. And so if we want to get our voice heard, we have to accept that most of the world doesn't think like us, doesn't find numbers and stuff fascinating. So we have to find a way to make it familiar and fascinating.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's kind of the approach we took with the book, coming up with the llama, telling the story of data. It's fun. Who doesn't love llamas? It's interesting. So you
Yeah, the
absolutely,
giraffe poodles.
the draft poodles are so awesome.
Hmm.
That absolutely we can take what we do. We don't have to think about it, dumbing it down. We don't have to think about it as taking away from it, because we have to make it interesting. This is part of it. This is what we do. And if we want to be successful, we have to embrace this. Otherwise, we're going to be stuck in the basement That's guaranteed.
Mhm. Yeah, and I was actually just thinking about something and I lost. Oh, here is where I was going with it. You were talking about like making the data interesting. Like this plays totally into data literacy. Like as someone who understands this information, like it's almost like your job to make it that no that someone doesn't have to be at your same level. And again, it's not dumbing it down. I'm not trying to repeat what you were saying, but like I think about like with the concept of data literacy and having this understanding, it's putting it in such a way that your audience is drawn to it. You're drawn to it intrinsically because of that's your personality, that's your skill level, that's what you've been focused on, but make it so that people are drawn to it and they understand it. Because that's the worst thing is if you just assume that the data is going to be interesting on its own and people are going to be drawn to it and be drawn to the same conclusions as you're wrong because someone's going to look at it and who maybe doesn't have the same focus or understanding of how that data was produced. They're going to come up with the complete opposite interpretation, or you at
Yeah,
least risk that people misinterpreting the information.
yeah, that's exactly right. And I think we have to think of it just as we would any other skill that we would add. Whether it's learning a second language, learning to play a musical instrument, it's the same kind of process that we go down, that we're not dumbing it down for our audience. We're breaking it down into a way that people that don't play the piano can play it. If I sat down and said, okay, Jim's never played the piano before, and I'm going to sit down and talk to him like he's a 30-year concert pianist and think he'll just get it, you're not, right? You're going to be frustrated. You're going to be like, this is stupid. I don't want to learn it. But if I understand my audience and say, okay, here's where Jim is coming from, I can take these incredibly complex techniques, but break them down in such a way that he can grasp it and work with it. You're going to be excited. Like the students are excited about the data they thought was like unapproachable and cold. Like you can break it down in such a way that it's like, wait a minute, I can do this. This is approachable. And that really is what we want to do. As I think one of our focuses as analysts, we need to be teachers and we want to be making more analysts. If nothing else, we want to be making people that are more data literate. And the only way we can do that is to teach. And the only way we can teach is to break it down into consumable pieces and not go in and say, okay, you've been studying stats for 30 years. Here's what we're going to do. Like, we're going to lose our audience. And then where are we at? We have all this knowledge locked in our head that isn't going anywhere.
Yeah. And so the perfect transition from there is how does sustainable analytics play a part with this?
It's huge. So if as a analytics team I've bought into the concept of sustainability, that's great. But I'm not operating in a cycle. It's one thing for me to have that vision, but if I'm working within a company that has low or no data literacy, they're not going to be able to understand the importance of why we're making this investment in sustainability. So everything that we want to do is going to be enabled and made easier by having people in the organization smarter about how they think about data. And it's no different from sustainability, from anything else that we're trying to do. Our goal has to be through education, and that is going to allow us the path to build the things that we want to build. So as we've talked about, we're all in that sustainability has to be the approach the organizations take to their analytics practices. But if as part of that we're not building data literacy and using story to make it approachable by people throughout the organization, it's going to be an incredibly difficult hill to climb. But if we do, getting to the top of this hill, planting the flag that we're thinking sustainably about analytics is absolutely approachable. I believe every organization is capable of it, but we have to take the right steps. And a big part of that is driving data literacy. And a big part of data literacy is making data interesting and approachable to the masses. And story is a huge part of that.
Cool. Well, I think that's a good point to wrap up for now around data and storytelling, or storytelling with data. A better way to think about it. Um, because we're going to continue this on with other ways like storytelling impacts, individuals in their careers, and even moving outside of just analytics, where this episode was focused on.
Yeah, I dig it. Again, a super important topic, and I'm glad that you know carved out a month or so for us to speak about it, especially at the beginning of the year. I think it's something that if we can get behind, we can make a major difference, not just within our teams or our organizations, but within our communities, within our world. It's such a powerful topic.
Yeah. Cool. Well, let's go ahead and wrap up there for now, and we will talk to everybody later.
See ya.
See ya.